Right. We are back with record 31 of We. We have eight more, eight, 31, 32, and nine more chapters to go. So we are almost done here. I wanted to finish it up for y'all, but unfortunately, the way things have been going the last couple of weeks, I hadn't been able to do it. But we're back and we will get this done. So, record 31. The Great Operation. I Forgave Everything. The Collision of Trains. Okay. Are you saved at the very last moment when it seemed that there was nothing to hold on to, that it was the end? It was as if you already ascended the steps toward the threatening machine of the well-doer, or as if the great glass bell with a heavy thud had already covered you. And for the last time in life, you looked at the blue sky to devour it with your eyes, when suddenly it was only a dream. The sun is pink and cheerful, and the wall, what happiness to be able to touch the cold wall, and the pillow, to delight endlessly in the little cavity formed by your own head in the white pillow. This is approximately what I felt when I read the State Journal this morning. It has all been a terrible dream, and the dream is over, and I was so feeble, so unfaithful, that I thought of selfish, voluntary death. I am ashamed now to reread yesterday's last lines, but let them remain as a memory of that incredible what might have happened, which will not happen. On the front page of the State Journal, the following gleamed: Rejoice, for from now on we are perfect. Until today, your own creation, engines, were more perfect than you. Why? For every spark from a dynamo is a spark of pure reason, each motion of a piston a pure syllogism. Is it not true that the same faultless reason is within you? The philosophy of the cranes, presses, and pumps is complete and clear like a circle, but is your philosophy less circular? The beauty of a mechanism lies in its immutable, precise rhythm, like that of a pendulum. But have you not become as precise as a pendulum? You who are brought up on the system of Taylor. Yes, but there is one difference. Mechanisms have no fancy. Did you ever notice a pump cylinder that is with a wide, distant, sensuously dreaming smile upon its face while it was working? Did you ever hear cranes that were restless, tossing about and sighing at night during the hours designed for rest? No. Yet on your faces you may well blush with shame. The guardians have more and more frequently seen those smiles, and they have heard your sighs, and you should hide your eyes for shame. The historians of the United States have all tendered their resignations so as to be relieved from having to record such shameful occurrences. It is not your fault. You are ill, and the name of your illness is fancy. It is a worm that gnaws black wrinkles on one's forehead. It is a fever that drives one to run further and further, even though further may begin where happiness ends. It is the last barricade on our road to happiness. Rejoice, this barricade has been blasted at last. The road is open. The last discovery of our state science is that there is a center for fancy, a miserable little nervous knot in the lower region of the frontal lobe of the brain. A triple treatment of this knot with x-rays will cure you of fancy forever. You are perfect. You are mechanized. The road to 100% happiness is open. Hasten then, all of you, young and old, hasten to undergo the great operation. Hasten to the auditoriums where the great operation is being performed. Long live the great operation. Long live the United States. Long live the well-doer. You, you, had you not read all this in my records, which look like an ancient, strange novel, had you, like me, held in your trembling hands the newspaper, smelling of typographic ink, if you knew, as I do, that all this is a most certain reality, if not the reality of today, then that of tomorrow, would you not feel the very things I feel? Would your head not whirl as mine does? Would there not run over your back and arms those strange, sweet, icy needles? Would you not feel that you were a giant, an Atlas, that if you only stood up and straightened out, you would reach the ceiling with your head? I snatched the telephone receiver. I 330? Yes, 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 330. And then, swallowing my own words, I shouted, Are you at home? Yes. Have you read? You are reading now? Isn't it stupendous?
Yes, a long, dark silence. The wires buzzed almost imperceptibly. She was thinking. I must see you today without fail. Yes, in my room after 16, without fail. Dear, she is such a dear, without fail. I was smiling, I could not stop. I felt I would carry that smile with me into the street like a light above my head. Outside, the wind ran over me, whirling, whistling, whipping, but I felt even more cheerful. All right, go on, moaning and groaning. The walls cannot be torn down. Flying leaden clouds broke over my head. Well, let them. They could not eclipse the sun. We chained it to the zenith like so many Joshuas, sons of Nun. At the corner, a group of such Joshuas, sons of Nun, were standing with their foreheads pasted to the glass of the wall. Inside, on a dazzling white table, a number already lay. You could see two naked souls emerging from under the sheet in a yellow angle. White medics bent over his head, a white hand, a stretched out hand, holding a syringe filled with something. And you, what are you waiting for? I asked nobody in particular, or rather all of them. And you? Someone's round head turned to me. Oh, afterward, I must first. Somewhat confused, I left the place. I really had to see I-330 first. But why first? I could not explain to myself. The docks, the integral, bluish like ice, was glistening and sparkling. The engine was caressingly grumbling, repeating some one word as if it were my word, a familiar one. I bent down and stroked the long, cold tube of the motor. Dear, what a dear tube. Tomorrow it will come to life. Tomorrow, for the first time, it will tremble with burning, flaming streams in its bowels. With what eyes would I have looked at the glass monster and had everything remained as it was yesterday? If I knew that tomorrow at 12 I should betray it, yes, betray, someone behind cautiously touched my elbow. I turned around. The plate like flat face of the second builder. Do you know already? He asked. What? About the operation? Yes. How everything suddenly, no, not that. The trial flight is put off until day after tomorrow on account of that operation. They rushed us for nothing. We hurried. On account of that operation? Funny, limited man. He could see no further than his own platter. If only he knew that, but for the operation, tomorrow at 12, he would have been locked up in a glass cage, tossing about trying to climb the walls. At 12:30 when I came into my room, I saw you. She was sitting at my table, firm, straight, bone-like, resting her right cheek on her hand. She must have been waiting for a long while because when she rose brusquely to meet me, the five white imprints of her fingers remained on her cheek. For a second, that terrible morning came back to me. She beside I-330, indignant, but for a second only. All that was at once washed away by today's sun, as happens sometimes when you enter your room on a bright day and absent-mindedly turn on the light, and the bulb shines but is out of place, comical, unnecessary. Without hesitation, I held out my hand to her. I forgave her everything. She firmly grasped both my hands and pressed them till they hurt. Her cheeks quivering and hanging down like ancient precious ornaments, she said with emotion, I was waiting. I want only one moment. I only want to say how happy, how joyous I am for you. You realize, of course, that tomorrow or day after tomorrow you will be healthy again, as if born anew. I noticed my papers on the table. The last two pages of my record of yesterday were in the place where I had left them the night before. If only she knew what I had written there, but I didn't really care. Now it was only history. It was a ridiculous far off distance, like an image seen through a reversed opera glass. Yes, I said, a while ago, while passing along the avenue, I saw a man walking ahead of me. His shadow stretched along the pavement, and think of it, his shadow was luminous. I think more than that, I am absolutely certain that tomorrow all shadows will disappear, not a shadow from any person or anything. The sun will be shining through everything. She gently and earnestly, you are a dreamer. I would not allow my children in school to talk that way. She told me something about the children, that they were all led in one herd to the operation, that it was necessary to bind them afterward with ropes, that one must love pitilessly, yes, pitilessly, and that she thought she might finally decide to. She smoothed out like the grayish blue fold of the uniform that fell between her knees, swiftly paste, pasted her smiles, I guess pasted, yeah, pasted her smiles all over me and went out. Fortunately, the sun did not stop today. The sun was running. It was already 16 o'clock. I was knocking at the door. My heart was knocking. Come in. I threw myself upon the floor near her chair to embrace her limbs, to lift my head upward and look into her eyes, first into one, then into the other, and in each of them to see the reflection of myself in wonderful captivity. There beyond the wall, it looked stormy. There the clouds were leaden. Let them be. My head was overcrowded with impetuous words, and I was speaking aloud and flying with the sun. I knew not where. No, now we knew where we were flying. Planets were following me, planets sparkling with flame and populated with fiery singing flowers, and mute planets, blue ones where rational stones were unified into one organized society, in planets which, like our own Earth, had already reached the apex of 100% happiness. Suddenly from above. And don't you think that at the apex are precisely stones unified into an organized society? The triangle grew sharper and sharper, darker and darker. Happiness? Well, desires are tortures, aren't they? It is clear, therefore, that happiness is when there are no longer any desires, not a single desire anymore. What an error, what an absurd prejudice it was that we used to mark happiness with a sign plus. No absolute happiness must be marked minus, divine minus. I remember I stammered unintelligibly. Absolute zero, minus 273 degrees Celsius, minus 273 degrees exactly. A somewhat cool temperature, but doesn't it prove that we are at the summit? As before, she seemed somehow to speak for me and through me, developing my own thoughts to the end. But there was something so morbid in her tone that I could not refrain. With an effort, I drew out a no. No, I said, you are mocking. She burst out laughing loudly, too loudly. Swiftly, in a second, she laughed herself to some unseen edge, stumbled, and fell over. Silence. She stood up, put her hands upon my shoulders, and looked into me for a long while. Then she pulled me toward her, and everything seemed to have disappeared, save her sharp, hot lips. Goodbye. The words came from afar, from above, and reached me not at once, but only after a minute, perhaps 2 minutes later. Why, why goodbye? You have been ill, have you not? Because of me, you have committed crimes. Hasn't all this tormented you? And now you have the operation to look forward to. You will be cured of me, and that means goodbye. No, I cried, a pitilessly sharp black triangle on a white background. What? Do you mean that you don't want happiness? My head was breaking into pieces. Two logical trains collided and crawled upon each other, rattling and smothering. Well, I am waiting. You must choose the operation in 100% happiness or I cannot. Without you, I must not. Without you, I said, or perhaps I only thought. I am not sure which, but I 330 heard. Yes, I know, she said. Then her hands still on my shoulders and her eyes not letting my eyes go. Then, until tomorrow. Tomorrow at 12. You remember? No, it was postponed for a day, day after tomorrow. So much the better for us. At 12, day after tomorrow. I walked alone in the dusky street. The wind was whirling, carrying, driving me like a piece of paper. Fragments of the leaden sky were soaring, soaring. They had to soar through the infinite for another day or two. Units of numbers were brushing my sides, yet I was walking alone. It was clear to me that all were being saved, but that there was no salvation for me, for I do not want salvation. Excuse me. Got my sweet tea today. Record 32. I do not believe. Tractors, a little human splinter. Do you believe that you will die? Oh, yes, man is mortal. I am a man. Consequently, no, not that. I know that. You know it. But I ask, has it ever happened that you actually believed it? Believed definitely. Believe not with your reason, but with your body. That you actually felt that someday those fingers which now hold this page will become yellow icy? No, of course you cannot believe this. That is why you haven't jumped from the 10th floor to the pavement before now. That is why you eat, turn over these pages, shave, smile, write. I don't shave. I'm just kidding. I do trim. This very thing, yes, exactly. This is alive in me today. I know that that small black hand on the clock will slide down here toward midnight. Then it will again start to ascend, and it will cross some last border, and the improbable tomorrow will have arrived. I know it, but somehow I do not believe it. Or perhaps I think that 24 hours are 24 years. So I am still able to act, to hurry, to answer questions, to climb the rope ladder to the integral. I am still able to feel the integral shakes the surface of the water, and I still understand that I must grasp the railing, and I am still able to feel the cold glass in my hand. I see the transparent living cranes bending their long necks, carefully feeding the integral with the terrible explosive food which the motors need. I still see below on the river the blue veins and knots of water swollen by the wind. Yet all this seems very distant from me, foreign, flat like a draft on a sheet of paper, and it seems to me strange when the flat draft like face of the second builder suddenly asks, "Well, then, how much fuel for the motors shall we load on? If we count on three, or say 3.5 hours." I see before me over a draft my hand with the counter and the logarithmic dial at the figure 15. 15 tons, but you'd better take, yes, better take 1,000. I said that because I know that tomorrow. I noticed that my hands and the dial began to tremble. 1,000? What do you need such a lot for? That would last a week. No more than a week. Well, nobody knows. I do know. The wind whistled. The air seemed to be stuffed to the limit with something invisible. I had difficulty in breathing, difficulty in walking, and with difficulty, slowly but without stopping for a second, the hand of the accumulating tower was crawling at the end of the avenue. The peak of the tower reached into the very clouds, dull, blue, groaning in a subdued way, sucking electricity from the clouds. The tubes of the musical tower resounded. As always, four abreast, but the rows did not seem as firm as usual. They were swinging, bending more and more, perhaps because of the wind. There, they seemed to stumble upon something at the corner. They drew back and stopped, congealed, a close mass, a clot, breathing rapidly at once, all of them, stretched their necks like geese. Look, no, look, look, there, quick. They, are those they? Ah, never, never. I'd rather put my head straight into the machine. Silence, are you crazy? On the corner, the doors of the auditorium were ajar, and a wide column of about 50 people. The word people is not the right one. These were heavy wheeled automatons, seemingly bound in iron and moved by an invisible mechanism. Not people, but a sort of human like tractor. Over their heads, floating in the air, a white banner with a golden sun embroidered on it, and the rays of the sun. We are the first. We have already been operated upon. Follow us, all of you. Slowly, unhesitatingly, they moved through the crowd, and it was clear that if they had in their way a wall, a tree, a house, they would have moved on just as unhesitatingly through the wall, the tree, the house. In the middle of the avenue, they fused and stretched out into a chain, arm in arm, their faces turned toward us. And we, a human clot, tense, the hair pricking our heads, we waited. Our necks were stretched out goose fashion. Clouds, the wind whistled. Suddenly, the wings of the chain from the right and left bent quickly around us, and faster, faster, like a heavy engine descending a hill, they closed the ring and pulled us toward the yawning doors and inside. Somebody's piercing cry. They are driving us in. Run. Everybody ran. Close to the wall, there was still an open, living gate of human beings. Everybody dashed through it, heads forward. Their heads became sharp wedges, and with their ribs, shoulders, hips, like a stream of water compressed in a fire hose, they spurted out in the form of a fan. And all around me, stamping feet, raised arms, Yunus, the double curved S, with his transparent wing ears, appeared for a moment close before my eyes. He disappeared as suddenly. I was alone among arms and legs, appearing for a second and disappearing. I was running. I dashed to the entrance of a house to stop to catch my breath, my back close to the door. And suddenly, like a splinter borne by the wind, a human being was thrown toward me. All the while, I having been following you, I do not want. Do you see? I do not want. I am ready to. Small round hands on my sleeves, round dark blue eyes. It was 090. She just slipped along my body like a hunif which, its hanger broken, slips along the wall to fall upon the floor. Like a little bundle, she crumpled below me on the cold doorstep, and I stood over her, stroking her head, her face. My hands were wet. I felt as if I were very big and she very small, a small part of myself. I felt something quite different from what I feel toward I-330. I think the ancients must have had similar feelings toward their private children. Below, filtering through her hands with which she was covering her face, a voice came to me. Every night I cannot. If they cure me, every night I sit in the darkness alone and think of him and of what he will look like if I am cured, I would have nothing to live with. Do you understand me? You must. An absurd feeling, yet it was there. I really must. Absurd because this duty of mine was nothing but another crime. Absurd because white and black cannot be one duty and crime cannot coincide. Or perhaps there is no black and white in life, but everything depends upon the first logical premise. If the premise is that I unlawfully gave her a child, it's all right, but don't, I said. Of course I understand. I must take you to I-330, as I once offered to, so that yes, this is in a low voice without uncovering her face. I helped her rise. Silently, we went along the darkening street, each busy with his own thoughts, or perhaps with the same thought. We walked between silent, leaden houses, through the tense, whipping branches of the wind. All at once, through the whistling of the wind, I heard, as if splashing through ditches, the familiar footsteps coming from some unseen point. At the corner, I turned around, and among the clouds flying upside down in the dim glass reflection of the pavement, I saw S. Instantly, my arms became foreign, swinging out of time, and I began to tell O90 in a low voice that tomorrow, yes, tomorrow, was the day of the first flight of the Integral, and that it was to be something that had never happened before in all history, great, miraculous. Think of it, for the first time in life, to find myself outside the limits of our city and see who knows what is beyond the green wall. O90 looked at me extremely surprised, her blue eyes trying to penetrate mine. She looked at my senselessly swinging arms, but I did not let her say a word. I kept talking, talking. And within me, apart from what I was saying and audible only to myself, a thought was feverishly buzzing and knocking. Impossible. You must not lead him to I-330. Instead of turning to the right, I turned to the left. The bridge submissively bent its back in a slavish way to all three of us, to me, to O, to him behind. Lights were falling from the houses across the water, falling and breaking into thousands of sparks, which danced feverishly, sprayed with the mad white foam of the water. Somewhere not far away, the wind was moaning like the tensely stretched string of a double bass, and through this bass behind us all the while, the house where I live at the entrance, O stopped and began. No, you promised, did you not, that? I did not let her finish. Hastily, I pushed her through the entrance, and we found ourselves in the lobby at the controller's desk, the familiar, hanging, excitedly quivering cheeks, a group of numbers around. They were quarreling about something, heads bending over the banisters on the second floor. They were running downstairs one by one, but later. I drew O90 at once into the opposite unoccupied corner and sat down with my back to the wall. I saw a dark, large-headed shadow gliding back and forth over the sidewalk. I took out my notebook. O90 in her chair was sinking slowly, as if she were evaporating from under her uniform, as if her body were thawing, as if only her empty unif were left, and empty eyes taking one into the blue emptiness, and a tired voice. Why did you bring me here? You lied to me. No, not so loud. Look here. Do you see? Through the wall. Yes, I see a shadow. He is always following me. I cannot. Do you understand? I cannot, therefore I'm going to write a few words to I-330. You take the note and go alone. I know he will remain here. Her body began again to take form and to move beneath the unif. On her face a faint sunrise dawned. I put the note between her cold fingers, pressed her hand firmly, and for the last time looked into her blue eyes. Goodbye, perhaps someday. She freed her hand, bending over slightly. She slowly moved away, made two steps, turned around quickly, and again we were side by side. Her lips were moving. With her lips and with her eyes, she repeated some inaudible word. What an unbearable smile. What suffering. Then the bent over human splinter went to the door, a bent over little shadow beyond the wall. Without turning around, she went on faster, still faster. I went to Yu's desk. With emotion filling her indignant gills, she said to me, "They have all gone crazy. He, for instance, is trying to assure me that he himself saw a naked man covered with hair near the ancient house." A voice from the group of empty raised heads. Yes, I repeat it. Yes. Well, what do you think of that? Oh, what a delirium. The word delirium came out of her mouth, so full of conviction, so unbending, that I asked myself, perhaps it really was nothing but delirium. All that has been going on around me lately. I glanced at my hairy hand and I remembered there are undoubtedly some drops of that blood of the sun and woods in you. That is why perhaps you. No, fortunately, it was not delirium. Or no, unfortunately, it was not delirium. Oh, goodness. Record 33. This without a synopsis, hastily the last, the day. Quick to the newspaper, perhaps there. I read the paper with my eyes. Exactly. My eyes now are like a pen or like a counting machine, which you hold on and feel in your hands like a tool, something foreign, an instrument. In the newspaper on the first page in large print, the enemies of happiness are awake. Hold to your happiness with both hands. Tomorrow all work will stop and all numbers are to come to be operated upon. Those who fail to come will be submitted to the machine of the well-doer. Tomorrow, how can there be any tomorrow? Following my daily habit, I stretched out my arm, instrument, to the bookshelf to put today's paper with the rest within a cover ornament with gold. While doing this, what for? What does it matter? Never again shall I, within this cover, never. And out of my hands, down to the floor it fell. Excuse me. I stood looking around over all my room. Hastily, I was taking away, feverishly putting into some unseen valise everything I regretted leaving here, my desk, my books, my chair. Upon that chair I 330 had sat that day. I was below on the floor, my bed. Then for a minute or two I stood and waited for some miracle to happen. Perhaps the telephone would ring. Perhaps she would say that, but no, no miracle. I am leaving, going into the unknown. These are my last lines. Farewell, you, my unknown beloved ones, with whom I have lived through so many pages, before whom I have bared my diseased soul, my whole self to the last broken little screw, to the last cracked spring. I am going. Record 34. Excuse me. The Forgiven Ones, A Sunny Night, a Radio Valkyrie. Oh, if only I had actually broken myself to pieces. If only I had actually found myself with her in some place beyond the wall, among beasts showing their yellow tusks. If only I had never actually returned here. It would be a thousand, a million times easier. But now, what? Now to go and choke that. But would it help? No, no, no. Take yourself in hand. D503. Set into yourself the firm hub of logic. At least for a short while, weigh heavily with all your might on the lever, and like the ancient slave, turn the millstone of syllogisms until you have written down and understood everything that happened. When I boarded the Integral, everyone was already there and in his place. All the cells of the gigantic hive were filled. Through the decks of glass, tiny ant-like people below at the telegraph, dynamo, transformers, altimeters, ventilators, indicators, motor, pumps, tubes. In the saloon, people were sitting over tables and instruments, probably those commissioned by the Scientific Bureau. Near them, the second builder and his two aides. All three had their heads down between their shoulders like turtles, their faces gray, autumnal, rayless. Well, I asked. Well, somewhat uncanny, one of them replied, smiling a gray, rayless smile. Perhaps we shall have to land in some unknown place, and generally speaking, nobody knows. I could hardly bear to look at them when in an hour or so I was to throw them out with my own hands, to cast them out from the cozy figures of our table of hours, to tear them away forever from the mother's breast of the United States. They reminded me of the tragic figures of the three forgiven ones, a story known to all of our school children. It tells about three numbers who, by way of experiment, were exempted for a whole month from any work. Go wherever you will, do what you will, they were told. The unhappy three spent their whole time wandering around their usual place of work and gazing within with hungry eyes. They would stop on the plazas and busy themselves for hours, repeating the motions which they had been used to making during certain hours of the day. It became a bodily necessity for them to do so. They would saw and plane the air with unseen sledgehammers. They would bang upon unseen stakes. Finally, on the 10th day, they could bear it no longer. They took one another by the hand, entered the river, and to the accompaniment of the march, they waded deeper and deeper until the water ended their sufferings forever. I repeat, it was hard for me to look at them, and I was anxious to leave them. I just want to take a glance into the engine room and then off, I said. They were asking me questions. What voltage should be used for the initial sparks? How much ballast water was needed in the tank aft? As if a phonograph were somewhere within me, I was giving quick and precise answers, but I, my inner self, was busy with my own thoughts. In the narrow passage, gray units were passing, gray faces, and for a second, one face with its hair low over the forehead, eyes gazing from deep within, deep beneath it. I'm sorry, eyes gazing from deep beneath it. It was that same man. I understood. They had come, and there was no escape from it for me. Only minutes remained, a few dozen minutes, an infinitesimal molecular quiver of my whole body. This quivering did not stop to the very end. It was as if an enormous motor had been placed under the very foundation of my body, which was so light that the walls, partitions, cables, beams, lights, everything was quivering. Man, my nose is itching. I did not yet know whether she was there, but I had no time. They were calling me, quick, to the commander's bridge. Time to go. Where? Gray, rayless faces below in the water, tense blue veins, heavy cast iron patches of sky. It was so difficult to lift my cast iron hand and to take up the receiver of the commander's telephone. Up, 45 degrees. A heavy explosion, a jerk, a rabid greenish white mountain of water aft. The deck beneath my feet began to move, soft as rubber, and everything below my whole life forever. For a second, falling deeper and deeper into a sort of funnel, becoming more and more compressed. The icy blue relief map of the city, the round bubbles of cupolas, the lonely leaden finger of the accumulating tower. Then, instantaneously, a cotton curtain of cloud. We pierced it, and there was the sun and the blue sky. Seconds, minutes, miles. The blue was hardening, fast, filling with darkness. Like drops of cold silver sweat, the stars appeared. A sad, unbearably bright, black, starry, sunny night. As if one had become deaf, one still saw that the pipes were roaring, but one only saw dead silence all about. The sun was mute. It was natural, of course. One might have expected it. We were beyond the terrestrial atmosphere. The transition was so quick, so sudden that everyone became timid and silent. Yet I thought I felt easier under under that fantastic mute sun. I had bounded over the inevitable border, having left my body somewhere there below, and I was soaring bodiless to a new world where everything was to be different, upside down. Keep the same course, I shouted into the engine room, or perhaps it was not I, but a phonograph in me, and the same machine that I was, with a mechanical hinge-like movement, handed the commander's trumpet to the second builder, permeated by the most delicate molecular quiver known only to me. I ran down the companionway to seek the door of the saloon. An hour later, it was to latch and lock itself. At the door stood an unfamiliar number. He was small, with a face like 100 or 1,000 others, which are usually lost in a crowd, but his arms were exceptionally long. They reached down to his knees, as if they had been taken by mistake from another set of human organs, and fastened to his shoulders. The long arms stretched out and barred the way. Where do you want to go? It was obvious that he was not aware that I knew everything. All right, perhaps it had to be that way. From above him, in a deliberately significant tone, I said, I am the builder of the integral, and I am directing the test flight. Do you understand? The arm drew away. The saloon, heads covered with bristles, gray iron bristles, and yellow heads, and bald, ripe heads, were bent over the instruments and maps. Swiftly, with a glance, I gathered them in my eyes. Off I ran, back down the long passage, then through the hatch into the engine room. It was hot there from the red tubes, overheated by the explosions. A constant roar. The levers were dancing their desperate drunken dance, moving ceaselessly with a barely noticeable quiver. The arrows on the dials. There, at last, near the tachometer, a notebook in his hand, was that man with the low forehead. Listen, I shouted straight into his ear. Because of this roar, is she here? Where is she? She? There at the radio? I dashed o- I dashed over. There were three of them, all with receiving helmets on, and she seemed a head taller than usual, wingy, sparkling, flying like an ancient Valkyrie. The bluish sparks from the radio seemed to emanate from her, from her also that ethereal, lightning-like odor of ozone. Someone, well, you, for instance, I said to her, panting from having run, I must send a message down to Earth to the docks. Come, I shall dictate it to you. Close to the apparatus, there was a small box like cabin. We sat at the table side by side. I found her hand and pressed it hard. Well, what is going to happen? I don't know. Do you realize how wonderful it is to fly without knowing where, no matter where? It will soon be 12 o'clock and nobody knows what. And when night, where shall you and I be tonight? Perhaps somewhere on the grass, on dry leaves. Blue sparks emanated from her, and the odor of lightning and the vibration within me became more and more frequent. Write down, I said loudly, panting from having run. Time 11:20, speed 5,800. Last night she came to me with your note. I know. I know everything. Don't talk. But the child is yours. I sent her over. She is already beyond the wall. She will live. I was back on the commander's bridge, back in the delirious night with its black starry sky and its dazzling sun. The hands of the clock on the table were slowly moving from minute to minute. Everything was permeated by a thin, hardly perceptible quivering. Only I noticed it. For some reason, a thought passed through my head. It would be better if all this took place not here, but somewhere below, nearer to Earth. Stop, I commanded. We kept moving by inertia, but more and more slowly. Now the integral was caught for a second by an imperceptible little hair. For a second, it hung motionless. Then the little hair broke, and the integral, like a stone, dashed downward with increasing speed. That way, minutes, tens of minutes passed in silence. My pulse was audible. The hand of the clock before my eyes came closer and closer to 12. It was clear to me that I was a stone. I 330, the earth, and the stone was under irresistible compulsion to fall downward, to strike the earth and break into small particles. What if already the hard blue smoke of the clouds appeared below? What if but the phonograph within me, with a hinge like motion and precision, took the telephone and commanded low speed. The stone ceased falling. Now only the four lower tubes were growling, two ahead and two aft, only enough to hold the integral motionless, and the integral only slightly trembling, stopped in the air as if anchored about 1 kilometer from the earth. Everybody came out on deck. It was shortly before 12, before the sounding of the dinner gong, and leaned over the glass railing. Hastily, in huge gulps, they devoured the unknown world which lay below, beyond the green wall, amber, blue, green, the autumnal woods, prairies, a lake. At the edge of a little blue saucer, some lone yellow debris, a threatening, dried out yellow finger. It must have been the tower of an ancient church saved by a miracle. Look, there to the right. There, over the green desert, a brown blot was rapidly moving. I held a telescope in my hands and automatically I brought it to my eyes. The grass reaching their chests, a herd of brown horses was galloping, and on their backs, they black, white, and dark. Behind me, I assure you, I saw a face. Go away. Tell it to someone else. Well, look for yourself. Here's the telescope. They had already disappeared, endless green desert, and in that desert, dominating it completely and dominating me and everybody, the piercing vibrations of the gong. Dinner time, 1 minute to 12. For a second, the little world around me became incoherent, dispersed. Someone's brass badge fell to the floor. It mattered little. Soon it was under my heel. A voice, and I tell you, it was a face, a black square. The open door of the main saloon. white teeth pressed together, smiling. And at that moment, when the clock began slowly to strike, holding its breath between beats, and when the front rows began to move toward the dining saloon, the rectangle of the door was suddenly crossed by two familiar, unnaturally long arms. Stop! Someone's finger sank piercing into my palm. It was I 330. She was beside me. Who is it? Do you know him? Is he not? Is he not? He was already lifted upon somebody's shoulders, above 100 other faces, his face like hundreds, like thousands of other faces, yet unique among them all. In the name of the guardians, you to whom I talk, they hear me. Every one of them hears me. I talk to you. We know. We don't know your numbers yet, but we know everything else. The integral shall not be yours. The test flight will be carried out to the end, and you will not dare to make another move. You, with your own hands, will help to go on with the test, and afterward, well, I have finished. Silence. The glass plates under my feet seem soft, cotton like. My feet too soft, cotton like. Beside me, she, with a dead white smile, angry blue sparks, through her teeth to me. Ah, it is your work. You did your duty. Well, she tore her hand from mine. The Valkyrie helmet with indignant wings was soon to be seen some distance in front of me. I was alone, torpid, silent. Like everyone else, I followed into the dining saloon. But it was not I, not I. I told nobody, save these white mute pages. I cried this to her within me, inaudibly, desperately, loudly. She was across the table, directly opposite me, and not once did she even touch me with her gaze. Beside her, someone's ripe, yellow, bald head. I heard it. It was I 330's voice. Nobility of character, but my dear professor, even a superficial etymological analysis of the word shows that it is a superstition, a remnant of the ancient feudal epoch. We I felt I was growing pale and that they would soon notice it, but the phonograph within me performed the prescribed 50 chewing movements for every bite. I locked myself into myself as though into an opaque house. I threw up a heap of rocks before my door and lowered the window blinds. Afterward, the telephone of the commander was again in my hands, and again we made the flight through the clouds with icy, supreme anxiety into the icy, starry, sunny night. Minutes, hours passed. Apparently, all that time, the motor of logic within me was working feverishly at full speed. For suddenly, somewhere at the distant point of the dark blue space, I saw my desk, and the gill like cheeks of you bent over it, and the forgotten pages of my records. It became clear to me. Nobody but her. Everything was clear to me. If only I could reach the radio room soon. Wing-like helmets, the odor of blue lightning. I remember telling her something in a low voice, and I remember how she looked through me and how her voice seemed to come from a distance. I am busy. I am receiving a message from below. You may dictate yours to her. The small box-like little cabin. I thought for a second and then dictated in a firm voice. Time, 1440, going down, motors stopped, the end of all. The commander's bridge, the machine heart of the integral stopped. We were falling. My heart could not catch up and would remain behind the rise, higher and higher into my throat. Clouds, and then a distant green spot. Everything green, more and more distinct, running like a storm toward us. Soon the end. The porcelain like, distorted white face of the second builder. It was he who struck me with all his strength. I hurt my head on something, and through the approaching darkness, I heard while falling, full speed aft, a brusque jolt upward. Excuse me, I'm going to have a drink. Record 35. In a ring, a carrot, a murder. I did not sleep at I did not sleep all night, but one thought the whole night. As a result of yesterday's mishap, my head is tightly bandaged. Seems to me not a bandage, but a ring, a pitiless ring of glass iron, riveted about my head. And I am busy with the same thought, always the same thought in my riveted circle, to kill you, and then go to her and say, now do you believe? What is most disquieting is that to kill is dirty, primitive. To break her head with something, the thought of it gives me a peculiar sensation of something disgustingly sweet in my mouth, and I am unable to swallow my saliva. I am always spitting into my handkerchief, yet my mouth feels dry. Excuse me. I had in my closet a heavy piston rod which had cracked during the casting, and which I had brought home in order to find out with a microscope the cause of the cracking. I made my manuscript into a tube, let her read me to the last letter, pushed the broken piston into that tube, and went downstairs. The stairway seemed endless, the steps disgustingly slippery, liquid. I had to wipe moisture from off my mouth very frequently. Downstairs, my heart dropped. I took the piston out and went to the controller's desk, but she was not there. Instead, an empty, icy desk with ink blots. And then I remembered that today all work had stopped. Everyone was to go to be operated on. There was no need for her to stay here. There was nobody to be registered. The street, it was windy. The sky seemed to be composed of soaring panels of cast iron, and exactly as it had seemed for one moment yesterday, the whole world was broken up into separate, sharp, independent fragments, and each of these fragments was falling at full speed. Each would stop for a second, hang before me in the air, and disappear without a trace. It was as if the precise black letters on this page should suddenly move apart and begin to jump hither and thither in fright, so that there was not a word on the page, only nonsensical app jum were. The crowd seemed just as nonsensical, dispersed, not in rows, going forward, backward, diagonally, transversely. Then nobody, for a second, suddenly stopping in my mad dashing, I saw on the second floor in the glass cage of a room, hanging in the air, a man and a woman, a kiss, she standing with her whole body bent backward, brokenly. This is for the last time, forever. At a corner, a thorny, moving bush of heads, above the heads separate, floating in the air, a banner, down with the machines, down with the operation. Indistinct from my own self, I thought, is it possible that each one of us bears such a pain that it can be removed only with his heart? That something must be done to each one before he. For a second, everything disappeared for me from the world, except my beast like hand with the heavy cast iron package it held. A boy appeared. He was running, a shadow under his lower lip. The lower lip turned out like the cuff of a rolled up sleeve. His face was distorted. He wept loudly. He was running away from someone. The stamping of feet was heard behind him. The boy reminded me, "You must be in school. I must hurry." I ran to the nearest opening of the underground railway. At the entrance, someone passed me and said, "Not running. No trains today." I descended. A sort of general delirium was reigning. The glitter of cut crystal suns, the platform packed closely with heads, an empty, torpid train. In the silence, a voice. I could not see her, but I knew. I knew that intense, living, flexible, whip-like, flogging voice. I felt there that sharp triangle of brows drawn to the temples. Let me reach her. I must. Someone's tentacles caught my arm, my shoulders. I was nailed. In the silence, I heard, "No, go up to them. There they will cure you. There they will overfeed you with that leavened happiness. Satiated, you will slumber peacefully, organized, keeping time and snoring sweetly." Is it possible that you do not hear yet that great symphony of snoring? Foolish people, don't you realize that they want to liberate you from these gnawing, worm-like, torturing question marks? And you remain standing here and listening to me? Quick, up to the great operation. What is your concern if I remain here alone? What does it matter to you if I want to struggle, hopelessly struggle? So much the better. What does it matter to you that I do not want others to desire for me? I want to desire for myself, if I desire the impossible. Another voice slow and heavy. Ah, the impossible, which means to run after your stupid fancies. Those fancies would whirl from under your very nose like a tail. No, we shall catch that tail and then swallow it and fall snoring. A new tail will become necessary. They say the ancients had a certain animal which they called ass. In order to make it go forward, they would attach a carrot to a bough held in front of its nose so that it could not reach it. If it had caught it and swallowed it, the tentacle suddenly let me go. I threw myself toward the place she was speaking from, but at that very moment, everything was brought down in confusion. Shouts from behind, "They are coming here, coming here." The lights twinkled and went out. Someone had cut the cable, and everything was like a lava of cries, groaning, heads, fingers.
I do not know how long we were rolled about that way in the underground tube. I only remember that underneath my feet, steps were felt, dusk appeared, becoming brighter and brighter, and again we were in the street, dispersing fan wise in different directions. Again, I was alone. No. Wind, gray, low twilight crawling over my head in the damp glass of the sidewalk. Somewhere very deep, there were there were light, topsy-turvy walls and figures moving along, feet upward, and that terribly heavy package in my hands pulled me down into that depth to the bottom. At the desk again, you was not yet there. Her room was dark and empty. I went up to my room and turned on the light. My temples, tightly bound by the iron ring, were pulsating. I paced and paced, always in the same circle. My table, the white package on the table, the bed, my table, the white package on the table. In the room to my left, the curtains were lowered. To my right, the naughty bald head bent over a book, the enormous parabolic forehead, wrinkles on the forehead like a series of yellow, illegible lines. At times, our eyes met, and then I felt that those lines were about me. It happened at 21 o'clock exactly. You came in on her own initiative. I remember that my breathing was so loud that I could hear it and that I wanted to breathe less noisily, but was unable to. She sat down and arranged the fold of her uniform on her knees. The pinkish brown gills were waving. Oh dear, is it true that you are wounded? I just learned about it, and at once I ran. The piston was before me on the table. I jumped up, breathing even louder. She heard and stopped halfway through a word and rose. Already I had located the place on her head. Something disgustingly sweet was in my mouth. My handkerchief. I could not find it. I spat on the floor. The fellow with the yellow fixed wrinkles, which think of me, the fellow with the yellow fixed wrinkles, which think of me. He must not see. It would be even more disgusting if he could. I pressed the button. I had no right to, but who cared about the rights at that moment? The curtains fell. Evidently, she felt and understood what was coming, and she rushed to the door, but I was quicker than she, and I locked the door with the key, breathing loudly and not for a second taking my eyes from that place on her head. You are mad. How dare you? She moved backward toward the bed, put her trembling hands between her knees, like a tense spring, holding her firmly with my gaze. I slowly stretched out my arm toward the table. Only one arm could move, and I snatched the piston. I implore you, one day, only one day, tomorrow I shall go and attend to the formalities. What was she talking about? I swung my arm, and I consider I killed her. Yes, you, my unknown readers, you have the right to call me a murderer. I know that I should have dealt the blow on her head had she not screamed. For for the sake I agree, one moment, with trembling hands, she tore off her uniform, a large yellow drooping body. She fell upon the bed. Then I understood. She thought that I had pulled the curtains in order to that I wanted. This was so unexpected and so stupid that I burst out laughing. Immediately, the tense spring within me broke, and my hand weakened, and the piston fell to the floor. Here I learned from personal experience that laughter is the most terrible of weapons. You can kill anything with laughter, even murder. I sat at my table and laughed desperately. I saw no way out of that absurd situation. I don't know what would have been the end if things had run their natural course, but suddenly a new factor in the arithmet- arithmetical chain, the telephone rang. I hurried, grasped the receiver. Perhaps I heard an unfamiliar voice. Wait a minute. Annoying, infinite buzzing, heavy steps from afar, nearer and louder, like cast iron, and D503, the well doer speaking, come at once to me. Ding, he hung up the receiver. Ding, like a key in a keyhole. You was still in bed, eyes closed, gills apart in the form of a smile. I picked up her clothes, threw them on her, and said through clenched teeth, well, quick, quick. She raised her body on her elbow, her breast hanging down to one side, eyes round. She became a figure of wax. What? Get dressed. That is what. Face distorted, she firmly snatched her clothes and said in a flat voice, turn away. I turned away, pressed my forehead against the glass. Light, figures, sparks were trembling in the black, wet mirror. No, all this was I, myself, within me. What did he call me for? Is it possible that he knows already about her, about me, about everything? You already dressed, was at the door. I made a step toward her and pressed her hand as hard as though I hoped to squeeze out of it, drop by drop, what I needed. Listen, her name, you know whom I am talking of. Did you report her name? No? Tell the truth. I must. I don't care what happens, but tell the truth. No. No, but why not? Since you. Her lower lip turned out like the lip of that boy in her face. Tears were running down her cheeks because I was afraid that if I did, you would stop. Oh, I cannot. I could not. I understood. It was the truth. Absurd, ridiculous human truth. I opened the door. Okay. So that's it for that reading. We will pick up the rest on the next episode.